It is great to have you all here with us today. Good morning. My name is Kim Bart-Mulliken, and I am the Senior Director of our NC Bar Foundation. Thank you for coming this morning to hear about an event that all of us are familiar with, which was the disaster that hit this region earlier this fall. As we all know, Tropical Storm Helene struck western North Carolina in September of 2024. And a major disaster was declared just a few days later. Within the week, the North Carolina Disaster Legal Services Program began its effort recruiting members of our legal community, including lawyers, paralegals, law students, to provide assistance to affected residents of our state. Since 2012, the NCBA Young Lawyers Division has helped to coordinate the volunteer-driven Disaster Legal Services Program in North Carolina in partnership with Legal Aid of North Carolina, FEMA, and the ABA YLD. Our North Carolina Bar Foundation program staff provides support along with the NC Pro Bono Resource Center and volunteers from the NCBA Paralegal Division. In response to Tropical Storm Helene this year, the DLS program also partnered with Pisgah Legal Services to serve Western North Carolina residents. Within a few weeks of opening volunteer recruitment, we had over 1,600 attorneys, paralegals, law students registered to provide assistance, including hundreds of attorneys from across the country. This was an incredible and honestly somewhat overwhelming outpouring of volunteer support for the DLS effort. On behalf of all of us involved in coordinating the Disaster Legal Services Program, thank you to everyone, all of you, who registered to volunteer. Whether or not we were able to pair you with a client for assistance, we are so grateful for your interest, for your willingness, and for your support. Thank you. I know that many of you also participated in our November 21st Disaster Legal Services CLE program that was hosted by the NCBA. More than 500 volunteers registered for that 6.5-hour program, which was only one of the volunteer attorney training supports that we created over the past year. The NCBF website also houses a Disaster Legal Services attorney resources page, which we update regularly with training videos, manuals, PowerPoint presentations, and forms. Thank you to the PLS and LANC attorney staff members who have contributed to that excellent library of resources over the past year. Throughout the fall and winter, our Young Lawyers Division also coordinated weekly office hours, a sort of phone-a-friend resource, where we invited client-serving volunteers to call and ask questions of their colleagues who volunteered their time and their expertise as expert advisors in high-need areas, including FEMA claims and appeals, insurance claims and disputes, landlord-tenant, and consumer and contractor fraud. To date, the DLS program partners have paired hundreds of Western North Carolina volunteer attorney clients with volunteer attorneys for pro bono assistance for disaster-related legal needs. And these pro bono pairings are in addition to the in-person clinic-based services that we coordinated through the program. We began offering disaster legal services free legal clinics in December. We held clinics in Newland, Hendersonville, Black Mountain, Burnsville, Marshall, Marion, and other locations throughout the region. We served well over 250 clients, answering questions, helping to overcome processing stalls, and resolving issues related to disaster recovery. Just a couple of weeks ago, on June 11th, the Bar Foundation partnered with Pisgah Legal Services and Legal Aid of North Carolina to host a Western North Carolina Ask a Lawyer disaster recovery hotline using the same phone service that we use to run the For All Lawyers on Call program annually. Around 50 attorneys made themselves available to answer questions about FEMA claims and appeals, FEMA roads and bridges issues, housing, property, consumer issues, and many other needs. We served 216 callers just in that one afternoon. Clearly, there is a continuing need for our help. To share more about that need, we've invited Jackie Kiger, Max Gibbons, Mark Holt and Alicia Edwards here today to share about their experiences working with individuals and families affected by the Helene disaster, helping to rebuild communities across Western North Carolina. Jackie serves as the Executive Director of Pisgah Legal Services here in Asheville. Jackie has been an attorney with PLS for over 15 years, but came into the Executive Director position in early August 2024, just weeks before Tropical Storm Helene devastated the region. She has done an absolutely phenomenal job of leading the organization through one of its most difficult times. The PLS team also has benefited deeply from the commitment of Max Gibbons, its Pro Bono Services Program Director. Max oversees the Pro Bono program, but currently also handles a full caseload of FEMA appeals and insurance disputes matter. Max spent most of his career as a litigator in Chicago, first engaging with Pisgah Legal Services as a volunteer with its Emeritus Attorneys Program. And in the weeks following Helene, Max became our statewide go-to expert on FEMA claims, and he organized the area's first in-person legal clinics to assist folks with initial claims. Mark Holt, thank you. Mark Holt is known to many of us, having served as the president of our Bar Association and Foundation. Mark claims that he has transitioned into retirement over the past couple of years, but you would never know it from where I sit. We are lucky to have Mark's involvement in many of our foundation's pro bono programs, including Disaster Legal Services, Wheels for Heroes, and our monthly SOGI name change clinics. Mark was one of the first volunteers to join us in Western North Carolina for the in-person DLS clinics, and he has since put in many hours and many miles driving from Raleigh to provide pro bono disaster legal assistance. And Alicia Edwards directs the Disaster Relief Project at Legal Aid of North Carolina, which works year-round to provide legal assistance and education to survivors of disaster throughout North Carolina. Alicia's office supports community economic development and long-term recovery and resiliency in disaster-impacted communities. If you ever tune in to the disaster recovery community conversation at the national level, you will quickly learn that North Carolina boasts one of the most well-run, if not the best-run, disaster legal response programs in the country. And that is in large part thanks to Alicia and her team and the work they do through Legal Aid's Disaster Relief Project. And last but not least, of course, thank you to our Executive Director, Jason Hensley, who not only provided leadership and support to our organizations to help make the disaster legal services effort meaningful to volunteers and helpful to the communities and individuals we served, but who also traveled to Western North Carolina to participate in every in-person DLS clinic that the Bar Foundation helped host in partnership with PLS and LANC. As a native of this region, Jason understood the depth of the need, as well as the unique ways that members of our statewide legal community were positioned to help. Thank you, Jason.
Good morning, friends. It is wonderful to see all of you, and it is wonderful to be up here with 4 rock stars. And so let's start with this. If you work with Pisgah or Legal Aid of North Carolina, or you volunteered with one of our clinics, would you please stand up? Thank you. The people of Western North Carolina and the people and the balance of our state are blessed by the work that all of you have been doing. As we talk about our discussion, I want to actually begin with geography. I grew up on the side of a hill. The sun came up behind one hill, and it came up probably a little later because it was on the other side of the hill usually. And the sun went down a little earlier for us because it went down behind another hill that was higher. And the reason I mention that is because geography over time shapes your identity, part of who you are. It is your reference point for where you are in the world and where you are in life. And it impacts you in so many ways. The Appalachian Mountains are the oldest mountain range in the world. There's a permanence to this mountain range and its impact that shapes an awful lot. The oldest rocks in the world can be found in the Appalachians. And the people who live in and around the Appalachians see that permanence and they feel it. And the beauty it brings, the grace that it brings can have another side to it. And so there we talk about this storm and what is different about this storm. And so what I have read from one meteorologist is that the amount of water by volume that was brought into the atmosphere in Helene was 150% more than any other recorded storm before in western North Carolina. It's an awesome amount of water. In Mount Mitchell, they recorded 24.5 inches of rain. 16.5 inches for that measurement would be a 1,000-year flood. That's more than a magnitude. One North Carolina Forestry Service station recorded 31.3 inches of rain between September the 25th and the 27th. It's remarkable. And all of that water that falls goes downhill. And when you're in the mountains and then you're in the foothills, gravity controls and it takes it where it goes. And where it goes is where people live. So as we think about that geography, standing here where we are in Asheville, if you went out and poured a cup of water in the river, it's going to go to the Mississippi through a long trip through Tennessee. If you go to Blowing Rock and you stand on one side of the road on 321, you pour a cup of water out, it's going to go into the Johns River and through what we call the Globe and down into the Catawba, and it passes through near Hickory and then down to Charlotte. If you go just a little further north and pour that cup of water out, it goes into the Yadkin and goes over to Winston-Salem and then moves from there to South Carolina. And then if you go on the other side of 321 and pour that water out, it goes into the New River and it flows to Pittsburgh before it makes its way back to the Mississippi through the Ohio. It's remarkable to think about where the water flows. And so when you drop this much water, it impacts so many people in so many ways. And that impact is not just in these mountains and in these hills, it's from there. And so we're going to talk an awful lot about the mountains and the hills, but the impact is beyond that. So like any tropical storm or hurricane, you have wind damage. And the wind damage is exacerbated by all the rain. Most of our hillsides, what's underneath all of these mountains? Rock, ancient rock. And the dirt is eroded rock. And gravity takes its course, right? And when you add water to it, the soil liquefies and it runs down. But when you add that water in underneath the trees and you apply the wind, the trees come down. The water moves downhill, it liquefies with the soil, and it becomes a landslide. And then we come to all of the other infrastructure issues that happen. So many people deal with a range of problems out of this, right? They have wind damage, their trees are down. A landslide may have come down the hill into them, and there were over 2,000 recorded landslides by the United States Geographic Survey. 2,000 recorded landslides. There are probably more if you look harder. All of those landslides go downhill and they go somewhere. If we move to infrastructure, the impact on infrastructure was tremendous. So we'll start with roads and bridges. There are 7,000, at least 7,000 private bridges that are gone out of this, that go to people's homes. And in the mountains, if you don't have that bridge, you're not going over that ridge to get to your house. You're cut off. You have to find a more creative way to get there. And those bridges didn't all happen at once, right? That's a journey of families. It's a journey of moving to places. It happens over decades and a century. And then they're gone. For North Carolina DOT, the estimate for the amount of road and bridge damage in western North Carolina from this storm is $5 billion of road and bridge damage. And $3.3 billion of that damage is in the 7 counties around Buncombe. Just in Buncombe County, 149 bridges have been impacted, 428 around in the 7-county region alone. It's tremendous. But then we get to power and water. And you know what else comes down when the trees come down? Cell phone towers. And so that's a big reason why the cell phones were cut off and you couldn't reach people up here. Power was out for weeks, and then you have water. And so I think many of us know about the challenges with water and other things in Asheville and in Buncombe County, but it went beyond here because there were places like in Morganton and other places downriver on the Catawba where their pumping stations went underwater because they've never seen so much water come down the Catawba. So not just here, but in many places, people live through situations of managing hospitals, correctional facilities, care facilities, without power, without water, without communications for periods of time. What a remarkable job that people have done to manage that. It's a tropical storm, and then it's a disaster, and it happens like that. And all of this comes with the cost to people. So as I understand it, the tally is 107 deaths in western North Carolina and 26 missing. And every so often, one of those who are missing are found. But for a moment, I just want to remember the cost there is to people when someone they love is swept away and they can't have that closure. It's a thing to be mindful of. It is a gaping chasm in somebody's life. And so you think about all of these things that have happened. It matters in a time of need when people step forward and help them out. And so let's talk about that. Jackie, you were here in the storm. Can you talk to us about what the storm was like and what happened through that?
Well, let me just say thank you, Jason, can you hear me? Is this on? Okay. Those were some really powerful words. We really appreciate that. Those of us from Pisgah and here in the Western North Carolina community, we went through a lot, and you very eloquently and beautifully, I think, summed up the impact and how devastating it was for our community. And I want to take a moment to thank the attorney community and the Bar Association, Legal Aid of North Carolina, and all the different partners, all the people here in this room that have played a role in supporting us out here in Western North Carolina, and continuing to do so, because I know that we all realize that this is a long, long road ahead of recovery. You know, from my perspective, you know, as Kim mentioned, I had been in the role of executive director for only 53 days when the hurricane hit. And, you know, technically I know it's a tropical storm, but it was a hurricane. it hit here in western North Carolina. And so at Pisgah, we refer to Helene as the hurricane. I remember that on Thursday afternoon, I was so cautious about closing down our office that day because there was a lot of rain and storms and I remember saying, well, out of abundance of caution, let's just close down and send everybody home. And as I reflect back now, almost, as we're closing on this year mark, I think to myself, I'll never feel that caution again. The safety of our staff and the importance of the safety of staff in our community, it hit hard because on Friday morning, I didn't have cell phone coverage. And I didn't know what was happening. I knew that my neighborhood, fortunately, seemed okay. The big trees that fell down, fortunately, fell away from all of my neighbors' homes, but it could have been so much worse. And we walked down to the end of the street just to sort of see what was going on, and we realized we couldn't get out. The road that runs parallel to the French Broad is the road that I live off of down in Arden. And the water was all the way up and flooding the road. And so for the next couple of days, my neighborhood we kind of walked down every day to look and see if that water was receding while we were completely unable to communicate with people or the staff. Really fortunate that I was able by Tuesday morning to get out. The water receded and we were able to get out, and I was able to get into the Pisgah Legal Services office, our main office here in downtown Asheville. By good fortune, we had electricity and we were able to get onto Wi-Fi at that location. We didn't have water, but being able to get linked up to Wi-Fi was incredibly important, and it became a hub. And Max was there every day, and our management team members who were able to safely get out began congregating there, and it became a place of mutual aid for our staff and our community. And we worked really hard in those first couple of days to make sure that we knew where our staff were at. It impacts me even further away, but I am so grateful to say that all of our staff were accounted for. We did not lose any lives. They lost friends, they lost homes, and we all lived through this as an organization and as people. And it wasn't until Wednesday after the storm that I knew that each of the 120 staff members at Pisgah Legal Services, we knew where everyone was, and we had talked to them. And we realized there was a lot that people needed. And that is when, people were bringing food and gas and water to the office or going out and trying to get it to folks. Some of our staff had relocated to other areas. They were bringing things in and doing runs to support each other. And you want to say that you've got a team that comes together, but, I can tell you that that's exactly what Pisgah is. It's more than... It's just, we came together in a way that you hope you never have to, and yet in the moment we did. And our community and all the different people who came to support us really helped us in those moments. By Monday, following the week after, by that Monday, October the 7th, we ran 2 clinics. We opened our doors to the community in Hendersonville and Asheville. We said we have power, we have bottled water, and we'll help you. And more than 600 people came out that day alone. And as Jason was saying, these were the people who had seen their house slide down a mountain. A woman who cried in my arms because she was so grateful that her house didn't kill the 4-year-old child that was in the home under it. The dad that had 5 kids and was landlocked. For 2 weeks, we met him weeks later, but he was landlocked for 2 weeks because his road to his home did wash away. The bridge and the road washed away. So they had to wait for the water to get down so that he could drive through it to get his children out. That's what this meant. The people the people that Pisgah Legal Services has worked with and for nearly 50 years now, low-income people here across the mountains. We have offices from Franklin to Morganton and everywhere in between, 19 locations across these mountains. We served more than 25,000 people last year, very low income, who otherwise wouldn't have access to our services. And what we learned in these early days of the storm was that the work that we did was needed more than ever. Poverty was exacerbated, times 2, times 3. I can't even begin to describe. People were driven into deeper poverty, and people who were living and just getting by suddenly found themselves having to navigate systems and complexities that they'd never dreamed of. They'd been working, they lost their job. They lost the only asset that they'd ever had, their home. And how many of these homes are mobile homes that were underwater, that slid to the side of a mountain, that the roof was completely torn off. So navigating the needs of our community and the needs of all of Pisgah was incredibly difficult. What I can say is that our partners at Legal Aid of North Carolina, some who live here too and went through this experience, and some who were able to come in from other parts of the state, supported us in helping to understand what those needs would be. And we were able to give our staff time for those who needed it, to heal, to find new housing, to work, from other locations until they could go back to their homes. And then the rest who were able to, we were out there on the ground, rolling up our sleeves and doing the different clinics, being a part of everything that we could be a part of. We've done more than 50 clinics to date across 15 counties, and we won't stop. Continues to be incredible need. And as Jason was explaining, the topography and the issues are so incredibly different here. First of all, we didn't think we could have a hurricane. A lot of folks grow up thinking that, well, we've got the mountains, they'll protect us. But this is this event that nobody could be prepared for or predict. But now we have to try to help people rebuild. And rebuilding and recovery is going to look vastly different if you are in Spruce Pine, or if you are in Flat Rock, or if you are out by Lake Lure. Just our communities are each very unique and need different things. And that's part of the response that we will be providing, is tailored and really personalized and community and client-based and centered. Because that's what we know at Pisgah from our history of working and being a part of this community. And, we are working through what it looks like to support staff who, all of us have been through this trauma. And when we hear and see the pictures, when you see the communities underwater, those of us know, we're all connected by different degrees of people who've been lost. It's a rush of emotions. And, but what we are focused so much on is really how we meet these unique challenges of our region. We will be doing this work for more than a decade, I'm going to say. One thing that happened with me was that people from across the country reached out from different legal services organizations and offered support. Executive director of Louisiana and Puerto Rico's legal services in Texas, they'd been through this. They'd supported their organizations through very difficult disasters and were a great resource to me. So I bring that in. I know we have other panelists, so I'll probably stop there because I could really go on, but let me just end with this. All I can say is that Pisgah has an incredible team, and some of them are here today and some of them are doing the work right now. But I need to just say thank you to that team for showing up for each other and for our clients, and continuing to do the important work with all of the challenges ahead.
Thank you, Jackie. So Max, when we think about the aftermath of the storm and the response to it and the needs, what did you see as needs, and how did the response play out?
Well, thank you, Jason, for hosting this, and thank you all the folks in the audience who are here and who have supported this effort for the past 8 months and will continue to do so. I mean, Jackie alluded to a lot of it. The biggest challenge that we faced as an organization at the beginning was what a chaotic situation it was. There were folks on our staff who were tragically impacted, but all of us were impacted. It was also because of the nature of the occurrence, it was kind of a slowly unfolding disaster. It took us all a while to realize how dire the situation was. By Friday morning, most of us didn't have power, water, or cell phone service. So it was hard to even figure out what's going on. You could walk around your neighborhood and see that it doesn't look great. I'm in Asheville, though. It's worse on the side of a mountain. It's worse right next to a river, which I'm, turns out, lucky not to be. So it took a while to figure out just how impactful this was going to be to our neighbors and how much people had lost. And during that period, as we're thinking about people's emerging legal needs, we're all juggling a lot of things because we have to find a source of non-potable water so that we can flush our toilets. Almost all of us have elderly neighbors who couldn't carry the water up to their houses or apartments. There was no gas. It would run out really quickly. So most of us didn't want to drive very far because it was very difficult to get gas. Obviously, we all needed some supplies. We had staff members driving to Charlotte to get supplies. There was a period of time at the beginning of the storm where I-40 from the east was damaged. It wasn't clear. Eventually, basically, they sent all the water in Greensboro to Western North Carolina, but at the beginning, it wasn't even clear how that was going to happen. We were cut off from Knoxville for a much longer period of time. So there was just a lot going on to try to figure out how to run your own life, how to make sure that your neighbors weren't in huge trouble. There were people who were landlocked, so there were people going around cutting down trees to get people out. It was a very dangerous situation for anyone, but if you're an elderly person or an infant and you've run out of water, as Jackie was saying about Thursday afternoon, she was right to close the office, but she thought about it. We were all stunned. We knew this was a bad weather event, but we didn't know what was going to occur. So that was the challenge. And you know, I have one Jackie story about the kind of things that we're spending our time doing in addition to thinking about how we can get out in the community. We needed potable, if we were going to open our office to the general public, we needed non-potable water. We needed some way for it not to become a sanitary hazard. So the Jewish Community Center said they were letting people come take the pool water out. And that's like the godsend of non-potable water because it's chlorinated and clear and kind of nice. But, you know, Jackie's the executive director for less than 60 days. She's on her knees on the side of the JCC pool while me and her and our HR director filled up all our water cooler things with water. So that was very time consuming. It was a lot of stuff just to try to make sure that things were healthy and sanitary and that your neighbors were in an okay spot. So that was a huge challenge for us, and that gets to where our partnership with Legal Aid of North Carolina and the Bar Foundation was so helpful because all of our folks live in Western North Carolina. But Legal Aid and the Bar Foundation obviously have people throughout the state. And the Young Lawyers Division of the American Bar Association, I know I saw Brooks Savage earlier today, so I think she's in here, but Brooks and Brad Pyland were instrumental in coordinating, in particular, people going to the disaster recovery centers. That was really helpful to us because we were local, so trying to set up clinics and that kind of thing. and we wanted to pop into the disaster recovery center, but given the chaotic nature and the impact on our staff, we didn't have time to staff it full time all day long. So we could come in, drop off materials, meet with some folks, but they would send people to kind of staff them full time to make sure that people knew where resources were. Legal Aid and the Barr Foundation have a long-standing disaster recovery project that Alicia plays a pivotal role in, that we were blessed not to be a part of for a very long time, and then suddenly had to be in October, and so relied on them a lot, relied on the knowledge base that they had developed over a long period of time, that they could dive in and help us. The Barr Foundation was amazing at gathering volunteers like Mark to help out with all of this as we were trying to react to facts on the ground. And the key focus that we had for folks in the area was to be a visible presence, to know that if your house slid off a mountain, there's somebody out there who can help you. We can't make it perfect, but we can help, and you can talk to somebody, and you can cry to somebody. There was a lot of crying, particularly at the early clinics, just because the trauma that people had gone through. So we wanted to open up to the broad public. You can't go to downtown Asheville and get a FEMA lawyer, right? So we kind of wanted to focus on, like, don't worry that much about income eligibility. You can do that under our rules in a clinic setting and an open to the public. Don't even have to run conflicts if it's kind of short services like that. So our idea was to try to make sure, in conjunction with these other organizations, that people knew that we were there, that they could come to us, that we would be there for the long term. And Jackie mentioned how great PLS staff is. I do want to emphasize that it was an organizational wide thing. Everybody's role shifted, and I'm not talking about on the legal side. I'm talking about our social workers, our frontline staff, our tax people, our Affordable Care Act navigators, our Medicaid navigators. Everybody was moved into a different role and reached out to the community and could help people with these issues and make sure that they got resources. So finish up just by quickly, Jackie alluded to, we tried to set up clinics really quickly at the beginning, a lot for FEMA initial applications. The issue, and this has all been evolving over time because the need changes, but the FEMA initial applications are a little bit tricky. FEMA, not its fault, has to be kind of a one-size-fits-all remedy, right? It's got to apply to the California wildfires just like Tropical Storm Helene. So people can get tripped up by the application, including by kind of saying they don't have home damage when they really do. You know, there's probably an element of this everywhere, but there's like an Appalachian stoicism that, like, my neighbor's home is really damaged, so I'm going to say mine isn't, even if it kind of is. And that can kind of trigger you out of assistance from FEMA because you're trying to be particularly honest and not complain about your situation when we all see people in such tragic circumstances. So there's something like deeply admirable about that, but we wanted to get people into our building, into our clinics, so that we could immediately try to guide them through that process so they didn't inadvertently disqualify themselves from assistance. And there were, particularly at the beginning, just myriad housing issues. Obviously, if you're sitting there in Western North Carolina in early October, you have no power, no water, your rental might have been damaged, maybe the road is blocked. You don't really think you should be paying full rent, right? And under the law, you probably are entitled to an abatement of sorts, but it's not really the landlord's fault, so it's not down to zero, and you could get evicted if you withhold rent. So we wanted to quickly get information out to people, because evictions will stay on your record, like landlords can find them in North Carolina. So we wanted to make sure that we just said, come in with any issue that you have. Hopefully we'll have an expert, but we could also find an expert and call you back. And it was more, can't count the number of clients that I work with Mark on, And it was just a collaborative process. Maybe we know the issue, maybe we don't, maybe we can learn it quickly, maybe we can look up resources. A lot of it is navigating what's out there for people, and the needs changed over time. We got into appeals and homeowners insurance claims and those kind of things, and we continue to do the clinics because I think as Mark and Jason and Alicia and Jackie will agree, there's something about people are just very grateful to have lawyers sitting at a table just listening to their issues. It's really impactful. They're not frustrated if you don't know the exact answer. They don't expect you to be an expert in anything. They're just kind of blown away that Mark drove from Raleigh to sit at a table on a Thursday afternoon and talk to them about their issues. So I think that's a good segue into what Mark's going to discuss.
Thank you, Max. Mark, your experience has been at the disaster resource centers, recovery centers in Ashe County, further up. On over, I think you served with volunteers who came from as far away as New Bern and Charleston. Can you tell us a bit about the program and the process and what you saw through this?
Sure. Thank you, Jason. And it's worth repeating what Kim said, which is that you were there with us at all those clinics, and it said so much about Jason as a leader that he conveyed a message to these wonderful organizations and to our clients and to our volunteers of how important this effort was. I don't feel worthy to be sitting up here at this table with folks who lived through the storm and work every day to care for people in the storm. And there are people sitting in the audience who do so much more. So I think what I can best do in answering your question is testify as a witness to what I saw and heard coming up to these mountains that I've loved since I was a child, just as a visitor. Both in the FEMA disaster recovery centers, called DRCs, and at our clinics, just to paint the picture for you, all the staff and volunteers and clients sit typically in one large room with folding tables. And you have volunteers and staff of PSGA and Legal Aid and the Bar Foundation on one side of the table and the clients on the other side of the table. And there's the first thing, it's so collaborative. Eavesdropping is a good thing. Max, when he's not with a client, typically wanders around the room, and it's just so wonderful when he says to a table, I couldn't help but hear you're talking about this, and he knows something helpful, and he stops and pulls up a chair and helps. Lauren Ashley with Legal Aid and I often have tables next to each other, and she'll lean over and say, I couldn't help but hear. And I was a real estate lawyer before I did this. Maybe I can help. This collaboration is wonderful. And the thing I witnessed about the clients coming in, it's this paradox about the folks of Western North Carolina. They are so independent and resilient, but they have the most wonderful sense of community and taking care of each other. And those things at first seem so different, but the best example of that, Jason, and looking at Kim and Alex, was our day in Avery County in Newland at the Frank Volunteer Fire Department. We witnessed that fire department was a community center where the community took care of each other through the whole storm. They had supplies that people constantly came in and got. They had people cooking food, not just for anybody who wanted to come in and eat and talk all day. They were putting together to carry out to people who couldn't get there. There's firewood outside. Take all you need. And it's 11 degrees when we showed up that morning to volunteer there, and people are just coming in to be warm. When we would sit with these clients, they showed so much courage. And part of the courage was to just say, I need help. They really believe, and they've lived through a lot in these mountains, we could tell. They really believed that they should take care of themselves and take care of their neighbors, but they really had to have some relief from FEMA and insurance companies and organizations like Legal Aid and Pisgah and the Barr Foundation. But just coming in and saying they needed some help showed courage. And I think the volunteers I watched and the staff and attorneys of Pisgah and Legal Aid and our North Carolina Bar Foundation showed compassion. And compassion, I believe, happens best when we take a posture of humility, that we can sit there at the table as equals. We didn't dress like this. I don't think Max and I have ever seen each other in a tie before. He's usually in a blue Pisgah t-shirt, and I'm in just jeans and something. I liken it to this. We have these tables that are a little smaller than this, like rectangles, and the clients come and sit down, and they're on one side of the table, and we're on one side of the table. And it's not like we have all the answers and all the information. They've learned a lot walking into FEMA centers. I developed this metaphor in my head that we're working on a jigsaw puzzle together. And they've come in, and the puzzle's about maybe a fourth put together, maybe half put together. Sometimes it's a 500-piece puzzle, sometimes it's a 1,000-piece puzzle. And we just sit there and look at it together. And you know, if you've ever done that with your family, Joanna and I do puzzles with our family from time to time. Our kids make fun of us for that. If you bring a fresh set of eyes to the problem, to the puzzle, they see a piece fit. And so I think these people have been trying to put together the pieces of a FEMA claim, of an insurance claim. And yes, we know a little more as lawyers, but really we're just sitting there looking, helping them say, I see where that piece goes. I see where that piece goes. And if we can get enough pieces put together that afternoon that they can continue the puzzle on their own, we spend an hour, hour and a half with them and send them on their way. If they need more help with their puzzle, then I would bring over Katie from Pisgah or Lauren Ashley from Legal Aid, and they would take them on as a client. And sometimes I go talk to them first and say, who wants this client? And they would take them on and process them right there, and they left that day with an attorney. And sometimes we were sending them to an attorney through the Barr Foundation list of volunteers around the state. I felt so good one day at a clinic where someone was getting the relief they needed from FEMA and an insurance company, but they had a very complicated contract presented to them by a geotechnical firm that was going to rebuild and secure the hill behind them so that it wouldn't have a mudslide again. I'm probably not using the right term for that. And the contract was so complicated. I got them a referral through the DLS Barr Foundation, and just in my mind to imagine that a corporate lawyer sitting in one of our state's biggest and best law firms was going to pro bono help this person remotely evaluate that contract. It makes you feel really good. What Jason mentioned about lawyers traveling, we had a lawyer come all the way to Avery County on that 11-degree day from New Bern. And I noticed he was on the volunteer list. He and I knew each other from practicing on the opposite side of cases years ago. I said, David, do you have a home up here? He said, no. He's a senior partner of a firm in New Bern. I said, do you have family up here? No. What brings you to rural Avery County on an 11-degree day? He said, we lived through Hurricane Florence, and I witnessed lawyers from all over the state come down and help us. I just thought I should come up here. And I signed up, checked in a motel, and he sat there all day and helped clients just because lawyers had come all the way to New Bern for another storm. Another lawyer came from Charleston, and he just was coming every weekend to do whatever he could. He volunteered all day with us. Brooks said, "We have another clinic tomorrow. Can you go to that one?" He said, "Sure, I'm all in." And so that's just some of what I saw. I want to shout out to Brooke Savage a little more. She and Brad led the Young Lawyers Division effort to go to DRCs, to disaster recovery centers, and I asked Alicia to share with me the spreadsheet of the DRCs, and it looks like lawyers, before we started these clinics, went to 14 DRCs, and when I was looking at her Excel spreadsheet, I saw Brooke's name all over it. So let's give Brooks. And I don't think Brad's in the room, but I saw his name too. So I'll close with that with one last thing. The day we were in Frank and Avery County, we unexpectedly had the opportunity to talk to two of those 107 families that lost loved ones. We were just talking about property damage claims, and Max and I were talking to this client together. In the midst of telling us about his property, he said, "And my father got washed away and died," and then went on to the rest of the property. And we just said, "Can we pause and talk about your father?" And his father had stepped outside the house, 80 years old, when the mountain slid down and carried him away, and his body was found 8 days later. And then in the afternoon, we heard another story. They're there to sort out the property damage, but in the midst of their story, a loved one had died. And those are powerful moments.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mark. Alicia, so you have the responsibility of not just thinking about what's going on still in the West and what's going to continue going on in the West. You're having to think about what if there's another storm that comes in this year, whether it's in the West or somewhere else. What are you seeing as continuing needs? What are you seeing as the challenges and the path forward?
Thanks. So we know at Legal Aid, and now everyone here probably knows, that disasters are unique and they're all going to be different. But what we do every year in disaster legal services is that we prepare. We have a standard preparation. We meet every year. And why North Carolina is one of the best disaster response legal services is because we do this work all the time, every year, whether or not there is a disaster. And since Matthew in 2016, this work has gone on. Unfortunately, like Max said, they weren't a part of it until now. So we welcome Pisgah to this work too. But before Helene hit, we met, we do our standard preparation. What do we need to be ready for any disaster that comes? And we talk about the materials that we have, we update those. What we thought our challenge was going to be this past year was that FEMA updated their regulations for the first time in 20 years. So we thought that was going to be our challenge. But we work on who's going to run the hotline, which is Legal Aid every year, but we make sure all those people are in place and they're ready. We work on press releases even before a disaster happens. We work on all of those things. That infrastructure allows us to be able to be nimble because we never know what the disaster will be, and so we are ready to respond. Of course, there have been Western storms before. Tropical Storm Fred hit in August 2021. That was a smaller, more manageable storm. Canton in Haywood County bore the brunt of that. But Helene obviously was much bigger, much more unmanageable. And because most of my team that works in disaster all day, every year, mostly we're in the East for obvious reasons, we had to be prepared to respond remotely. We have 4 legal aid offices in the West. We were checking on those staff. We were checking on Pisgah. We were trying to remotely support everyone, taking on some of the intake for Pisgah, working on our offices, trying to get everyone back online, seeing what we can do. Just to tell you the nature of how things change, especially with Helene. Ashley and I went out about a week after Helene, and we were told that there was no power, there was no water, there was no anything. So we brought tools with us, thinking we were going to go to the bathroom. Outside, we had our hiking boots on. We were prepared. Well, when we got there, it turns out power had just been restored, plumbing had just been restored. We were in the nicest, most loveliest senior center, thinking that we were, going to shovel a hole in the back, which we didn't need to do. So you just need to be prepared, is what I'm saying. So the interesting thing about North Carolina is that we're quote unquote lucky in that we have a hurricane season. So we are able to be intentional about how we're going to respond to a storm and who our partners are going to be. As everyone has attested to, those partners you're going to be working with a lot. You are going to rely on them. You're going to have to trust them. You're going to have to just collaborate or give something to them that you cannot handle. And so we are able to do that because we have a hurricane season. Unlike a lot of my colleagues throughout the country, tornadoes can happen at any time, wildfires can happen at any time, and they don't have that ability to really figure out when they can prepare. We know that there are legal needs that are apparent right away after a storm and that evolve. We are still responding at Legal Aid to Hurricanes Matthew and Florence from 2016 and 2018. So we are very sure that the legal needs from Helene are going to last, like Jackie said, a decade or more, because this was a big storm and was devastating. There are certain legal issues that are present usually in any disaster. We're not sure what the disaster response federally and state will be like going forward, so that will be a new challenge for us to prepare. But in general, you have your FEMA applications and appeals, you have your evictions, like Max said, and then those evolve. And what's unique to Helene are the private roads and bridges issues, the landslide stabilization issues. We're not exactly sure how those will play out. So again, just knowing that a lot of the legal issues that we are seeing now and that we will see in the future are going to be a lot based in real property issues. So titles, easements, air property issues, wills, estates, estate administration. So that's how people out there in this community could really support Legal Aid and Pisgah and the Bar Foundation. If you have those skills, if you have the desire to help in those issues, whether that's your practice or not, those are the issues that we will be seeing and we will be dealing with going forward. I have clients whose homes have been completely washed away. They still have a mortgage on their home. What are they going to do about that? How are they going to deal with that? Where are they going to live? Are they going to pay for that mortgage plus their other home somewhere else? Is that sustainable? Not for our clients, probably not for Pisgah's clients either. So we have to be creative. But underneath all of that is the standard preparation that we do each and every year. The partners that we have, our core partnerships, Pisgah now, and then the Bar Foundation, Legal Aid, the ABA, the YLD. Again, it's unclear exactly how all of those programs will go forward in the future, but we know that we have this relationship that we continue to cultivate because we need to be here for each other. We don't know what the future holds. God forbid there's another storm this year, hopefully not, but we don't know where it might be. We've had tornadoes in central North Carolina before, so we just, knowing that we have the support of the community, the legal knowledge, the collaboration between legal services and other nonprofits, government agencies, always cultivating those relationships, we could really respond to basically anything that we hope not to respond to, but we are ready and able to do so. We already have our annual DLS prep meeting on the calendar, so we are not resting on our laurels. We're still going to think about the future and what we can do. And I thank all of you for all of your support. As Kim said, we've done these kinds of talks before, and we always end with this kind of response is expensive, and it takes all of us and all of you to make it happen. And it's really about the community. Lawyers, we don't usually deal with people in their happiest times. They come to us in crises. They come to us to help solve their problems. When a disaster happens, that makes everything exponentially worse. The crisis that they had is now born in major trauma. It's communal trauma too, so everyone in the community is dealing with it. Disasters don't discriminate against who they hit and who they don't, so whole swaths of people in whole swaths of areas are dealing with this, and that makes it in some ways nicer for people because they know it's not them, it's not personal to them. On the other hand, everywhere they look, someone is dealing with that trauma too. So we are there to hold their hands, to hug them when they're crying, and to just help them through, unfortunately, the complicated bureaucratic disaster recovery space. But thank you to all of you, and thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Alicia. I'm going to offer a few closing thoughts. And we have just scratched the surface of what this experience has been like and what it's going to be. This is just scratching the surface. I want to note something that I think everybody touched on, and it is the emotional cost and burden for the clients who come to these clinics. But when somebody comes to the clinic, I mean, we talk about the stoicism of people in Western North Carolina. We can find that stoicism in many people in the state. It's very prevalent here in the West, the self-reliance. They come to the clinic because they've reached a point where they feel they have to. It's overcome the stoicism, right? And so what you see is somebody comes in and they have to come up to the desk and get checked in, and they have to relive that thing to talk about while they're there, right? And that shows up. And then they sit down with the attorney or attorneys they're going to be with, and they got to write that check again, right? That emotional check. They go through that thing again, and it's there again. And our volunteers and the team from Pisgah and the team from Legal Aid are there helping those individuals multiple times through that day, right? You don't sit there with one person who's had a traumatic experience and has had to relay that as part of getting help. You're doing that with multiple people through the day. But I would offer to you that if you have not volunteered at one of these clinics, I would offer to you, when there is another disaster, and there will be another disaster, do not have apprehension regarding that, because you will fill your soul by doing this work and helping someone else when they need you the most. You know, so much about tomorrow is giving people hope. And they come to these clinics because they need a path forward, they need help, and they need hope. I appreciate so much the hope that has been given by so many in this room. I will now come to one more pointed thing. I don't think that legal services in this country have ever been challenged more than they are right now with regards to funding. There has been no appropriation from the federal government for disaster legal services. Our programs our partner programs that we work with have had to rely upon funding from IOLTA and donations from people, including many of us in the room. And then it's the volunteer time. That is what is doing this work. And you're needed in so many ways. Your time is needed, your energy, your thought, and your consideration. As we go through this time, please continue to lift everybody up. I encourage you to spend time here in Asheville. The economy needs your resources as well, and people need to know that you like Asheville and you like being here and you like what they have to offer. I thank all of you for being here. We're going to reset the stage, very short break, and then Coach Williams should be in here to sit with Rob and talk about resilience. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.